Hey, what's up everybody? This is Alfred from Practical Code Academy. Welcome to a new video. And in today's video, we're gonna go and create this application, the Currency Converter app. And technically, this application will be able to convert one currency to another currency. However, you need to add the currencies to the local storage, and we're gonna store all this data in the local storage inside your browser. So when you first load the application, it will give you the message that there is no currencies already stored in your system, and you need to add a currency. So if I try to convert now, it's gonna tell you enter a number of currency to convert because this field is empty. So when I click add currency, I will have this module which have to select here. Each select field will have a list of countries with their corresponding currencies. So for example, I can select France, which is euro, to US dollars. I'm gonna go all the way down to the United States US dollar and put in the conversion factor. So how much 1 euro will be in the US dollars, which in that case, 1.17. When you click Save Changes, you will get the success message saying that the currency already saved in your system. And it will be added to the select or the drop-down menu you have here. So we have here one currency, which is euro, and two to US dollars. And if I try to put here 2 euros to how much equivalent in the US dollar and I press convert, I'll get the value here, 2.34. You can add multiple currencies. You can add from US to euros. So I'm going to select France again. France. And the conversion factor for that is 0.85. And if I save the changes, and now if I try to convert $2 to euros, I'm gonna get 1.7 euro. However, if I try to convert from United States to United States and press convert, I'll get this error message here. So as you can see, it's a full application, have its own storage, so you can store the data in the local storage. Also, we're not going to use any APIs, so we're not going to make any calls to APIs. The user will put the value himself or add it to the local storage. Also, we're going to have this error message or validations that will show here and the success messages that will pop up here. We have the modules. We're going to use Bootstrap for this project because we don't want to go over the CSS. Our main focus is going to be the JavaScript functions here. Okay, I hope you're going to like this project, and let's get started. Okay, we're going to start by creating the project folder here. I'm going to call it Currency Converter. I'm going to open it with Visual Studio Code. I'm going to create the markup file, which is index.html. Also going to create the JavaScript file, which I'm going to call it main.js. In the markup file here, I'm going to generate a boilerplate using emmet by typing exclamation mark and press tab. And that's going to give me like this HTML skeleton here. I'm going to change the title. I'm going to call it Currency Converter app. Save it. And as I mentioned before, we're going to use Bootstrap because we don't want to spend a lot of time focusing in the CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and search for Bootstrap. And I go here, get started. And Bootstrap, technically, you need to link the CSS and the JavaScript library. So the first step, I'm going to copy the link tag here for the CSS library. I'm going to add it in my head here. I don't need the integrity or the cross-origin attributes, so I'm going to delete these. Save it. And now I'm going to go over here. Notice that there are 3 libraries because Bootstrap 4, version 4, this is version 4.5, is dependent on jQuery. So it have a dependency on jQuery. So you need to first add jQuery. Then it also have a dependency on popper.js. And finally, this is the Bootstrap JavaScript library. So I'm going to copy all three of them and I'm going to add them here. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. So I don't need this here. I don't need this attributes. I don't need this attributes. Once we link the JavaScript file, I'm going to link my main.js file underneath the Bootstrap libraries and the jQuery scripts. So I'm going to do script. Source will be the main.js. And that's it. We added Bootstrap. Just to double check that we added the Bootstrap, I'm just going to add an h1 here. I'm going to call it hello world. And see how it's going to look like on my browser. So I'm going to open it with the live server. As you can see here, you will notice that the font changed. Also, the size of the text itself changed. That means the Bootstrap is already installed or correctly configured in your application. So I'm going to close this right now. I'm going to leave this open. And I'm going to take out the h1 element here. To use Bootstrap, you need to use the container div or to wrap all the elements that you're going to use or the classes that you're going to use from Bootstrap surrounded by a div that having a class of container. So I'm going to do a div, have a class container, and now I can add whatever I want here or the markup inside this container. So I'm going to add another div and I'm going to give it a class of background light. So I'm going to have a light background. So I'm just going to put anything inside it right now. I'm just going to put h1 below so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, as you can see, the background is a little bit gray color or light gray color. That's because I'm using the class BG light. And this is how you use Bootstrap. You just add the classes to any tags or any elements that you want to use, and it will add the CSS required for that. So I'm adding here BG light. I'm also want to add the padding -4 or padding size 4, and just the P will create the padding for top, bottom, left, and right. And now, as you can see, it will give it a little bit padding, top, left, bottom, and right. And also I want to give a shadow to that container or to this box I have right here. So I'm going to add the shadow class. Once I save that, notice that this here container or box, whatever you call it, going to have like a drop-down shadow. Okay, that's good. Now I can remove the h1 because I want to add h3. So in the h3 title, we're going to add the currency or the title for our application, which is going to be currency converter app. And I want it to be in the middle of the parent or whatever this div here. To put it in the middle, you got to use the class text center. And this is technically, we'll put it in the center of the parent element. And now it's going to go to the center. Next, after the title, I need to create my form. So I'm going to use a form tag. I don't need the action. However, I'm going to give it an ID. I'm going to call it currency form. And also I want to give it a little bit margin to the top. To do margin top, it's going to be MT-5, which is size 5, which is the biggest margin that we can get. And now inside this form, I'm going to add an input element. This input element, I'm going to give it class of form control. And the form control technically will give the padding and the margin required to make it a little bit better. As you can see right now, it will take the full width. So this is all done by Bootstrap. And also I want to use the form control large to make it a little bit bigger, or the height of it to be a little bit bigger. As you can see now, the height get affected. Also, I want to use margin bottom -2, or gonna give it a little bit margin or size 2. And if you want to understand what is margin size 2 and what is margin top -5, you simply can highlight here or inspect it. And as you can see, this is our input element here. and we give it margin bottom -2. And if I look here, margin bottom is 0.5 rem. So the size 2, it represents 0.5 rem. And also for the form here, oh, it actually didn't add because I added to the ID, my bad. It actually should be a class margin top -5. And now it makes sense. As you can see, it get dropped down and the margin top is going to be 3 rem. So when I use the size 5, it's 3 rem. When I use the size 2, it's 0.5 rem. That's if you're curious about what is size 2, what is size 5, you can always inspect the element. So MT means margin top. MB means margin bottom. Just M is going to be top, bottom, left, and right. Now, also I need to add an ID here. So I'm going to add an ID because this is where the user is going to type the currency like $1, $2, $3, whatever he enter. So the ID, I'm going to put it currency input. Now I'm done from this input field. After the input field, I'm going to add a title, which is an H6 title. I'm going to give it a class of text center. And this is going to be from. And this is going to be the title for the next field, which is the select tag. So for the select, I don't need the name. I'm just going to add the ID from select. And I'm going to give it a classes or Bootstrap classes. So I'm going to use the custom select. And notice once I save, I'm going to have this nice select or drop down menu. And I'm also going to make it large. So I can use custom select -LG, which is short for large. And as you can see, the height will change. And now it's going to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to give it a margin bottom with size 3. Now we have a little bit margin down there. And also make this margin bottom 3. Don't worry about the option tags that we have to insert inside the select tag because we're going to do that actually dynamically using the JavaScript. We're not going to do it here. After the select, I'm going to have another H6 title. I'm going to give it a class text center. That's going to be 2. And I'm going to copy this select here because I need another select element. However, it's not going to be from select. It's going to be to select the ID. I'm going to save it. And now it's going to look like this. And both of them are empty right now. And now I'm going to need to add 2 buttons here, but I want to make them responsive. To make them responsive, we're going to use the Bootstrap grid system. And in order to use Bootstrap grid system, you must have a div with a class of row. So I'm saying inside this row, I can put whatever I want. And for Bootstrap, they divide the screen or the parent element to 12 pieces. You can think about it like pieces. So this from here to here, it's 12 pieces. If I'm adding an element with 6 pieces, it will take up only half. If I'm adding an element with 3 pieces, it will take only quarter. If I'm adding an element with 12 pieces, it will take up the whole parent container here. So I need to wrap up my button with a div that will have a column -MD, that's mean medium screens. So when it's in a medium screen, I want it to be taken 6 columns, which is half of the container. So if it's a medium screen, I want it to be half. And by the way, medium screen and up. So if it's a larger screen, it will also take half. Okay, what if it's below the medium screen, like small screen or extra small screen? We want it to take the full width, which in that case is going to be column -12. It will take the whole 12 slices here. So column -MD-6. This means for medium screens and up, it will going to be 6 columns. If it's less than medium screen, it will be 12 columns. Now I can add my button. And this button here, I'm going to add a type of button because by default, they are submit buttons, or the type will be submit. And I'm going to give it an ID here. And the ID I'm going to call it add BTN. And here I'm gonna give it a text, add currency, save it. Now I'm gonna style this button using Bootstrap, so I'm gonna add a class of PTN. So just PTN will give you the padding and the margin, and the border will affect all of this. But to give it a color, you need to add BTN dash whatever color you want. And Bootstrap support warning for yellow, success for like a green color, danger for red color, dark for like a blackish color, and they have their own system for colors. You can always go for Bootstrap colors and give you the full list of color names. But here we want to do the BTN dash warning to make it yellow color background. And here we have our first button. Now I want to do the second button similar to this. So I'm going to copy here, I'm going to save it, and now I'm going to have the second button here. But this one, I don't want it to be colored yellow. So instead of warning, this is the primary color, primary. And instead of add currency, we're just going to do convert. Okay, that looked good so far. And the ID here is not going to be the add button. I'm going to change it to, I don't need to change it to anything. Actually, I don't need the ID at all, because this is the button will be submitting the form. So the type will not going to be button anymore, because when the user click this button, the whole form will be submitted. So the type will be submit. Now I need to style a little bit. As you can see, they're on top of each other. So I need to add margin y-axis, so my, which means top and bottom, -1, and save. And for the top here, also my -1. Okay, that'll look better. And I want it to be in the center of the screen. So I'm gonna do text center for the wrapper, and they are already in the center of the screen. And notice right now, this is a small screen. It's less than the medium screen. And that's why each button taking the full width to be displayed. And if I increase the size of the screen a little bit to the medium screen, know that each of them will take half of the parent container size, which are going to be taking 6 and 6. And this is going to make it responsive. Okay, that's it for this container or this wrapper here. However, we want to give it a little bit margin to the top here. So I'm going to do, for the container here, empty-5, margin top 5, display it as flex. So once you display it as flex, notice what happened here. It will gonna come all the way to the left because you didn't justify the content to be the center. But notice another thing, it will only take the width of the content inside this wrapper here. So now all we need to do to center it inside the screen, give it justify content center class. So right now here, I'm gonna give it justify content center. Now that's gonna bring it to the center of the screen. And that's it for this window or this screen. Now we need to add this modal and hook it up to our button here. So I'm gonna add here a little bit comments. So this is gonna be the main converter. And underneath here, I'm gonna do add modal. This is gonna be the pop-up modal. For the add modal, we're gonna do a div. I'm gonna give it a class of modal, and also gonna give it a class of fade. And so this is gonna be the animation. We want it to fade in and fade out. And you need to give it an ID. So in that case, I'm gonna give it an ID. I'm gonna call it add modal. So eventually what we need to do is when the user click this button, we want to trigger this modal. So this is the add currency button here. So we need to add extra information or extra attribute here. So for this button, we're going to add the data toggle, and the data that it will toggle will going to be a modal, because we want to toggle a modal. And also we have to get the data target attribute, which model that we targeting. And we need to pass here the ID of that model. And if you notice here, we added the ID as add model. And when you reference this ID, you have to use the hash tag and then the ID name, which is going to be add model. Actually, model was an A. Now inside my model here, I need to add a div, another div here. I'm going to give it a couple classes. The modal dialog, modal dialog dash centered, and this is will center it inside this in the middle of the screen. So when it's going to pop up, it's going to pop up and fade in the middle of the screen. Now I need to specify the content of this model, so I need to create another div and get a class of modal content. And for the content, you're going to have a header, body, and a footer. So I'm going to have a div. I'm going to give it a class of modal dash header. And also I'm going to have another div with another class of modal dash body. And finally, I'm going to have the footer. Now I'm going to start working with the header. For the header, all I need just a title with an h5 tag. And this title, I'm going to give it a class of modal title. And I'm going to put here add currency conversion. And now let's test it out. As you can see, this is our header here. We'll have add currency conversion. So this is going to be our h5. As you can see, the body doesn't have anything and the footer doesn't have anything yet. But now we need to add like an X button here when the user can actually click on it and make this model disappear or dismiss this model. So I'm going to add a button here. And for this button, I'm going to do the type button. I'm going to give it an ID of add btn. I'm going to give it a class of close. And then I'm going to pass the data dismiss equal how I want to dismiss this data. I want to dismiss it as a model. So I want to dismiss this model. And inside this button here, I'm going to use an HTML entity, which is times. Which is going to give me the X that the user can click on it. However, I need to wrap it with a span. So I'm going to put the times here, copy it, and put it inside the span. And let's give it a try or test it. As you can see, now I have this X. When I click on it, it's going to dismiss my model. For the model body, this is the original one we want to create. As you can see, it will have a form. So I'm going to add a form here without an action, no action needed. And inside this form, I'm going to have an h5 with a class of text center. And this is going to be from. After that, I'm going to have a select, which is a drop-down menu with all the countries' currencies. And I'm going to give it an ID from input. I need to style it. It's going to be class. If you remember, we used the custom select, custom select dash LG, which is large, margin bottom 3. It's technically similar styling to whatever we have in the top over there. And I'm going to have another h5 who's also class text center. This is going to be 2. Now let's give it a try. As you can see, we have the from. Good. Having an extra E here. why the 2 is not centered. Okay, I have the E here. Okay, add currency. Now both are centered. I'm going to copy this select because the other one is going to be identical to it. However, I'm going to change the ID from input to input. Now, look good, look good. This is the original one here. I need another conversion factor title, and then I'm going to add a number field here. Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to need another h5 here. Class text. Center. I'm going to pass conversion factor. And now I'll need an input field with a type of number. I'm going to give it an ID, factor input, and I'm going to give it the class form control. To style it with Bootstrap, also form control -lg. And also I'm going to do margin bottom -2, and I'm going to make this field required. Okay, let's save it. That look good. Here what we have, the model, the select, and the input field here with the type of number. So if you try to type in any characters, it will not going to accept it. It will only accept numbers, as you can see. Okay, now if you go here, we're only missing the footer. We need to add this close button and save changes button. So I'm going to go back to my original application that I'm developing right now. And I'm going to go inside the footer or the model footer. And inside the model footer here, I need to add a button. The first one was type button, because this is not going to submit the form. So when I click this button, I want to close the model. So I'm going to give it a class of PTN. And we want this gray color. To use the gray color, it's PTN second rate color. I'm going to do close. I'm going to add data dismiss equal modal. I need to give it an ID of close add. Let's give it a try now. Close. If I close it, it will close the model. Good, it's working. So I can close it either from here or from the X. Okay. The second button is going to be the submit button. That's actually will submit the data to be saved or save the changes. So it's going to be also a button. However, the type will be submit. I'm going to give it an ID of save changes. And here, save changes. And now I'm going to style this button. I'm going to give it a class PTN primary. Save this. Now add, save changes. It's working. It's here. We're not submitting any data yet. Now, if you take a look at our original application, if you want to convert 5 euros to US dollar and I press the convert, as you can see, we're going to have here the result shows as a model. However, the result and the title here will be actually inserted dynamically using the JavaScript. However, we have to put the markup for this model. So I'm going to just put adding here result model. I'm just going to put the skeleton of this model. I'm not going to put any kind of data because that's whatever the title and or the header or the body of this model will be added using the JavaScript. So the div class model, and it's going to be fade model. I'm going to give it an ID to access it using the JavaScript. And the ID here is going to be result model. Okay, inside the model, I'm going to have another div with a class modal dialog, modal dialog, centered to centered. However, the header or the body of the model itself, we're gonna provide it using JavaScript, and we're gonna provide them inside here, inside the class model content. So now it's gonna be empty, nothing inside it. Another thing we need to add is the message area, because if you remember, we have messages that come and show on the side here. If there is, in case of it, there is any error or anything, we also need to add the container that will contain these messages. However, it will be provided using the JavaScript. So I'm going to add here messages area, and it's just a div. And I give it an ID of MSG container. So this is the container. Will have all the messages that we're going to show to the user. For this messages area, I need to style it a little bit, but to style it, I'm going to use a style tag here inside the head. So I'm going to use a style. Here, I'm going to select the ID MSG or message container. And I want to do the position to be fixed. I want to put it all the way to the right here, right on top. And top is going to be 2%. And right is going to be 2%. So it's going to be fixed. Whenever I show any message, it's going to be always fixed in the top right position of the screen. And that's pretty much all the styling that I need to do here for this messages container. Okay, one thing it's already missing here. When I want to show the result, I want to trigger it by clicking a button here. And this button, I want it to be hidden for now from the user. But however, when I have a result ready, I want to click this button, which is the button that the user cannot see it, to load this model. Because keep in mind, to load a model, it must be tied to a button. So when a user click a button, it will show the model. In our result model here, it's not tied to any button. So we have to create this button. So I'm going to create this button anywhere, probably after here. I'm going to call it my hidden button. So I'm going to create a button. And this button technically will be a hidden button. So I need to do hidden so nobody can see it. And this button is going to do data toggle model, and data target, or that model that we want to show, in that case is going to be my result model. And also I'm going to give this button here an ID of btn show results. And now from the JavaScript, I can click this button programmatically to show the result without the user see what happened, or he don't have to click this button, but you can actually use the click function on this button to click it behind the scenes. Okay, since we already finished the markup, we need to, when we click on this button, and we need to have a list of all the countries or the drop-down menu. To get that, go to your browser, try to type in or search for currencies by country JSON, and the first option here, you will have this JSON format file, which having a country and currency code. However, I don't want it to be in JSON. I want it to be an object. So I already took this file, I modify it to be an object, and now here I'm going to create another file. I'm going to call it countries.js, and I'm going to paste it here. And you're going to find all the files for this project, the description of the video. You can use it right away. It have all the countries and the currency code. As you can see, it's just an object. So it's let countries equal. It's an array of objects, and each object will have the country key with the name of the country and the currency code and the code of the currency of this country. So I have the countries.js. I need to load it to my HTML. And it's very important to load it before the main.js, because the main.js will use this file. So I'm going to do script source countries.js, and now I load this object that having the list or the array of all the countries objects, and it's been loaded before I use the main.js. And I'm going to open the main.js, and the first step, I'm going to need to get a reference to all the elements that I'm going to need in the JavaScript file. So I'm going to need the currency form. So I need to create a constant, the currency form. And if you remember, we're going to get the document, get element by ID. And in that case, we give it an ID currency form. And the reason we want to get a reference to it, because we want to listen when the user submit this form. So when he submit this form, we want to do some actions. Also, we want to listen or get a reference to the from select. I'm going to give it a constant from select. It's a document dot get element by ID. If you remember, we do from select, and this is the drop down menu that the user have in the main screen. Similarly, I'm going to just copy this multiple times down there to select, which is the drop down menu for the select element. Next is going to be the currency input, where the user entered the currency. It's the input field where the user input the currency. And I'm going to give it a constant. I'm going to call this constant currency input. And I need to get a reference to the result model, where the model that will show the results. If you remember, we put it as an empty model and we said we're going to populate it using JavaScript. So right now I'm going to do result model. And this result model will, if you go to the markup here, we need to access this model content. And we can do that with not get element by ID. However, we can do query selector. And for this query selector, I want to access the result model. And inside the result model, I want to access the class that have the model content. Now here, I'm accessing this ID, and inside it, the div that have the model content class. Okay, now I need to get reference to show results button. And if you remember, this is our hidden button here, show results button, so I can trigger it from the JavaScript. This is element by ID show, we call it btn dash show dash results. I give it the same name here for the constant, btn show results. Also want to get a reference for the message container or the messages container. So if you want to populate or show the user any message, I'm going to call it MSG or message container. And if you remember, we give it an ID, also MSG container. Next is going to be the form input. And this is going to be the input drop down menu when the user add currency. So it's going to be form input and to input. I change the constant name here, form input to input. And also the user have to input the factor or the number of this conversion. So we give it an ID of factor input. Factor input. Copy this a little bit down. And if you remember, we have the button or the submit button, save changes. save changes, save changes. And finally, we have the add button. I'll call it add btn. And if you remember, we have the add btn here, which is gonna for the add currency itself. So this is the button where the user clicking it. We want to listen that the model will load up. That means the user already clicked and he added a currency. In that case, we need to show him a message or success message saying your currency has been added. Well, this is here's done for the main. Also, we get a reference to all the elements that we're going to use in this application. So I'm just going to do create constant document elements. The next step, I'm gonna do another constant. However, this constant will load the countries list from the countries file that we have. Remember this file here, it's having a variable called countries. So I'm gonna get this countries list. I'm gonna create a constant that's called countries list, which is gonna be equal to countries. And this countries is already loaded because we added the script of countries before the main.js. And that's it for today's video. In this video, I want to show you the user interface with Bootstrap, how to create this form. And in the next video, we're actually going to create the functions that are going to make it work. Right now, we have our application here having no functionality. It's just the user interface. When he click here, you have this model. There is no drop down. We want to load them and also make stuff work here when the user submit the form. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how actually to add the functionalities to this project. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you liked today's video. And if you do like it, hit the thumbs up button. And also, if you're not subscribed to our channel, subscribe now to get more videos like this.